So if you've ever thought about investing in stocks and shares, but you just don't know where to start, then this is the video for you. I'm going to be covering how much money you need to get started, where do you even buy stocks and shares, and what do you do if it goes wrong. This is my full video guide just for you, so let's get started. Hey there, welcome to the video. I'm Mark, and I remember about 10 years ago when I started buying stocks and shares, I literally didn't have a single clue about how to do it or how much money I needed or anything like that at all. So I've created this full video guide just to talk about exactly what you need to think about and what you need to do if you want to buy stocks and shares. So this is going to be quite a long video and we're going to break it down into different sections, but we're going to cover questions like how do you buy shares? How much money do you need to invest if you just want to get started? How much money can you realistically make if you invest in stocks and shares? How much money have I made on some of the shares that I've actually bought? What platforms can you use to buy shares? And how long does the whole thing take? So this is going to be quite a long video and I'm going to cut it down into different chapters. So if you want to jump ahead, check out the timestamps in the video description below. But anyway, let's get into it. So just a disclaimer before we start, I am not a financial advisor and this is not financial advice. I'm just a stupid guy on YouTube telling you what I've done right and what I've done wrong. But anyway, let's get started. So number one, why should you invest in stocks and shares or invest in anything else at all? Well, maybe you've come to this video because you want to make money, or maybe you've never saved anything at all. So what I want to guide you through is just some of the kind of simple things. Let's lay this out in layman's terms. If you start saving now and you save £100 a month and you pop it under your bed, that money is not going to make you any interest at all. That money is not going to work for you, and it's actually going to devalue over time as well. So the £100 you have now under your bed is not going to be worth £100 in 2, 3, 5 years time. It's actually going to go down in value due to something called inflation. So you may have heard the term inflation being used on news programs, and essentially everything that we buy, every product or service, goes up with inflation every year, and it can be roughly from 2 to 4%. So let's have a little look now at what that actually means. So on average, prices become inflated by roughly 2 to 4% every single year. So that means if you've got £5,000 in savings and you want to use that in 10 years time, your £5,000 won't be worth anywhere near what it's worth today. It won't buy you the same amount of stuff in 10 years time that it could buy you right now, and that's due to inflation. So if you want to check out this inflation calculator, I'll put a link in the description below so you can check it out yourself. If you have £5,000 and you hold it for 10 years, let's say inflation is just 2.25%, you'll essentially have £4,000 worth of real world spending in 10 years time. But what if inflation goes up to 4.5%? Well, you'd be left with just £3,200 worth of usable monetary value, because everything you want to buy could have possibly gone up by this amount. So your money is worth less. So just for example, let's take a look at prices between 1982, when I was born, to 2007. How have prices changed in 25 years? So a price of a pint of beer in 1982 was just 58 pence. And in 2007, that increased to £2.80. A pack of cigarettes was £1 2p in 1982. And by 2007, it rose to £5.98. Now, if you're into luxury cars, a Porsche 911 in 1982 was £16,000, brand new. But in 2007, they're worth almost £60,000. And it's 2021 now and they're worth even more. I think they're about £90,000. So you can see by holding money in a tin underneath your bed, it's just going to buy you less and less stuff as we go through time. If you want to check out a link to that inflation calculator, by the way, I'll put a link in the description below so you can check it out for yourself. So with that said, our aim in investing is not only to make money, but it's actually to smash inflation. If we can make 10% a year, we account for that inflation happening, and then we also make some extra money as well. So one of the main reasons I wanted to get into shares in the first place is that when I looked at the interest I was getting on my savings from the bank, I was earning just 1%. Yes, that's right, 1%. But even if we look today, in the current nationwide ISA I've got, I would be getting 0.01%. Can you believe how crazy low that is? So I literally don't save anything in the bank. I think other than safety, yes, it's safer than having it under your bed and it'll earn you a little bit of interest, 0.01% more interest than having it in a tin under your bed. But other than that, it's almost pointless to save money in a bank account. I think there are much better and smarter ways to use your money to make you money. So let's turn our attention to stocks. But before we jump in, there's something I want to talk about which is super important and really interesting, and it's called compound interest. And if you've never learned about it before, it's really going to blow your mind. So compound interest is essentially the interest that you make on your original savings, and then the following year you're going to make money not just on the original, say, £1,000 you had in savings, it's going to be on the £1,000 and the interest you made in that previous year, and it carries on and on like so. And of course, the more money you make in interest, it gets added on top. The following year, you make money on that original savings plus the interest of that year and the previous year, and it compounds and compounds and compounds and makes you a lot of money. So let's look at this scenario here. So let's just say that you have £10,000, right? You're really lucky. You've got £10,000 in savings and you've put it in that tin in your bedroom and you never save anything else again, okay? So in year 2, you've got £10,000 under your bed, right? In year 3, you've still got £10,000 under your bed because you're not making any interest, but you've got that money there saved. Now let's look at compound interest. Now let's just say you take that £10,000 and you put it into a good performing fund. And again, you never invest anything into it again. You just have that one £10,000 that you invest. And this fund makes 10% a year, a pretty good fund. But let's look at the example. So if you put £10,000 into this fund that makes 10% a year and just left it there, how much money would you have in 25 years? The tin under your bed, you'd still have £10,000. Maybe you think you'd have 40 grand, £50,000 if you're really lucky, right? Wrong. If you just put £10,000 once into a fund that could make 10% a year, you would have £108,000 in 25 years' time because of the compounding effect of that money. So you can see here, if we put £10,000 into this fund, we make 10%. So we make £1,000 a year in interest on year 1. So for year 2, we're now making 10% of £11,000. And then we'll end up with £12,100. Then the following year, we're making 10% again, but we're making now 10% of £12,100. So we'll actually make £1,210 in interest. So this just builds and builds. So now let's fast forward to year 24 and 25. At this point, you'll have racked up over £89,000, meaning in year 24, you'll make £8,954 in interest. So that's the power of compounding. And I actually think you can apply this to lots of areas of your life. I mean, think about going to the gym, for example. You know, if you go to the gym once, it's going to do nothing for either building muscle or losing weight. Actually, if you went on a Monday for the first time and then went on a Tuesday and then went on the Wednesday, still it's going to do very, very little. It's that compounding effect of going 5 days a week, 4 weeks out of the month, and then doing that sort of month on month. That's really going to give you the results that you need. So in that same sort of breadth, also when you think about saving, it's very, very simple and easy to understand that you should put away £5 a week, but we don't do it because it's so simple and easy. But if you do, that compounding effect will have such a good effect on your money. So that's the power of compound interest. There of course will be good and bad years. I mean, look at COVID, that really hit shares quite hard. But, if you saw a 2 to 15% spread for 25 years, it could actually be quite achievable to earn 10% every single year if you took the average over those years. So now we understand a bit about compound interest. Let's talk more about what a stock or share actually is. Okay, so now let's talk about investing in stocks and shares. Now, there's essentially two main things that you can do. You can either buy shares in a company, and you're just buying a share in like Apple, for example, or you can invest in a fund. Now, I actually do both of these things, so let me explain a little bit about the difference. So let's start with shares, and it's exactly what it sounds like. If you buy a share, you will own a share in that company. So you could buy shares in companies like Apple, Microsoft, Google, even Starbucks, and you can buy one share or multiple shares. Now, if you want to see the share price of any company, you can even use the built-in Stocks app on your iPhone or iPad. And you can load that up right now, and you can see today's price for Apple. You can see its share price live for today, or Microsoft or Tesla or any other company that you want to check out. So you can buy one share of that company at that price you see on that Stocks app. So essentially you make money if the share price goes up, and you lose money if the share price goes down. But just remember, you only actually lose that money if you sell that share on that day. So if you buy some shares today and you see the share price drop 10%, you can hold that share. You don't have to obviously sell it. You only, will lose money if you sell a share on that date. I mean, the same goes for selling a share if it's up as well. It's all right to say it's virtually up by 20%, but you'll only make that money if you sell that share. So it's always worth bearing that in mind though, because when you first get into shares, what will inevitably happen is you'll buy a share, something will happen in the news, and if you've bought Apple, it'll drop 10%, let's say. Especially when COVID hit. I had some shares that were doing really, really well. COVID hit, the pandemic hit, and a lot of my shares dropped by 20 or 30%. But because you don't lose unless you sell the share on that day, as long as you hold through it, in my case, all of those shares went back up again, and most of them are much, much higher than they were even before the pandemic. So just remember that you only make money if you buy or sell a share. Now with shares, that's actually not the only way you can make money. Some shares, including Microsoft that I have, actually pay out a dividend. And a dividend is a share of the company's profits. Now, to be honest, it's a very small amount. So let me break it down. I have 27 Microsoft shares, which I paid £2,633 for. Now, at today's price, my shares are now worth £5,737. But between August 2020 and August 2021, my 27 shares also earned £37 in dividends. Now, I know £37 doesn't sound like a lot in dividends from that amount of shares, but when you take into account that if you had the same £2,633 in your nationwide bank account, you'd be earning less than 0.5% interest. So you would have earned £13.16 if you had 0.5% interest, which you probably won't even get. You'd have earned just £13. I earned £37 in dividends, regardless of the share price going up or down. So it's definitely worth thinking about dividend shares as well. And I'll go into a bit more detail about those a bit later on. So even with that Microsoft investment, I've earned twice as much interest as I would have done just leaving the money in the bank. But in addition to that, the share price has also pretty much doubled as well. So I've got double the amount of money that I started with. How cool is that? So next up, let's talk about funds. And there are essentially two kinds that I deal with. There's a managed fund, and then there's index funds like the FTSE 100 or the S&P 500. They're two different kinds of funds. But let's talk about a managed fund first. Now, a managed fund is usually a company that will be set up by some financial experts, and they will pull in money from all different investors like you or me, and then they will decide themselves where that money will be invested. And it will probably be invested in hundreds of different shares. Now, the good thing about this is that you're essentially making your money from professionals doing the work of buying the shares. You don't have to think about what companies your money is going to go into. So that's really, really good. It can take a lot of the stress and risk of investing out for you. But in many cases, you have to watch out for, in a managed fund, the actual percent they're charging you and the fees they're charging you as well. I've seen some that charge 4% a year fee. Now, that may not sound like a lot, but if they're only making you, say, 7% and they're charging you 4%, it takes up a huge chunk of the profit or the interest that you could have. So it's definitely worth looking at. If you are going to go down this route, I'd make sure you go for a more reputable company, someone like St. James's Place, or a company who have been around for a long time and can actually show you a proven track record of what they've achieved and also what their fees are. So you can also invest in things called index funds. Now, you may have heard ones like the Dow Jones, the S&P 500, or the FTSE 100 that we have here in the UK. So exactly what is something like the FTSE 100 and how does that work? Well, essentially, when you invest in the FTSE 100, you're investing into a fund that invests into the top 100 companies here in the UK. So your money is going into the best performing companies here in the UK. And I can hear you saying, well, what if one of these companies drops out? Well, essentially they're replaced with another company. So let's just say 50 of those companies in the top 100 go bankrupt tomorrow. They're essentially replaced with the next best performing 50. So you'll always be dealing with the top 100 companies here in the UK. The S&P 500 actually seems to perform better. It has companies like Apple and Microsoft in, because the S&P 500 is the US's version of the FTSE 100. So it's worth checking these two out. There's no fees for investing in these funds, essentially. You'll have your sort of buy and sell fees that you would normally get, but they're really worth looking into. Again, if you're unsure about what to invest in, but you want almost like a nice safe bet, these could be the ways to go. They don't normally shoot up like 200% or anything like that, but they have a very nice steady increase over the years. And if you look back through the charts and graphs on, let's say, the S&P 500, if you'd have invested any time over the last sort of 25 years, you'd still be doing pretty well now. So it's usually a safe bet. And I know loads of friends who will only put their money into an index fund because it is historically a safe bet. So that's the FTSE 100, the S&P 500, and that's an index fund. So as I mentioned earlier in the video, I actually do a bit of both of these. I put some into an index fund in my ISA, and then I'll put some of my savings directly into companies like Apple, Microsoft, and Tesla, for example. So how do I pick a share? Let's go through that next. Okay, so let's talk about the nitty gritty. Let's talk about how you pick a share. Now, I've got shares in companies like Microsoft, Shopify, Apple, Tesla, just to name a few. But there's a few factors that I think, other than the numbers, that you need to think about when buying shares. And I think you need to think about the actual company and brand. In your mind, will they be here in 10 years? So don't just pick a company randomly because they're doing well today or they might do well tomorrow. Will they be doing well in 10 years' time? Now, you can look at financials today, of course, and you should, but that won't give you the full picture. You know, when I invest in companies like Microsoft, Apple, Google, Amazon, I feel very strongly that Apple will still be here in 5 to 10 years' time. I will still be buying that iPhone. Now, things can change. Obviously, Nokia were at the top of the phone game and then Apple destroyed them. So it can happen, but it's not usually overnight. It wasn't just like the iPhone was announced and then Nokia got destroyed. It happened over kind of like a 2 to 3 year period. So there's always time for you to pull out your money if you need to. But remember, buying shares isn't like a horse race. In a horse race, one horse wins and then the rest lose. And if you have your money in one of the losers, you lose all of your money. But in shares, you could be investing in an industry like tech that I tend to buy into. And you could have Microsoft, Apple, Google, Shopify, Tesla, for example. And in this case, all of these companies could grow. So this is why it's really important to put all of your eggs into multiple baskets, because some will grow more than others. You may have one share that will dip a little bit while the others are still growing, and it helps balance out your whole portfolio. So again, this is where an index fund could be really good for you, because you're investing not just in one company, you're investing in multiple companies. Now, I've got to be really honest with you. I've actually done best when I have invested in single companies like Shopify and Apple and Microsoft and Google, because I feel like with certain companies, I do feel like I actually understand them pretty well. So I just feel actually more safer in that scenario. But you may feel like, you're early on in the investing game, so you may want to invest in an index fund first as you wait on the sidelines and maybe look at some of the companies that you want to invest in the future. So you probably want to hear about some of the good shares that I've bought, and Shopify has definitely been one of the best shares or investments that I've ever made. So let me tell you about this one. I purchased £4,500 worth of Shopify shares about 5 or 6 years ago, and it was all of the money I had, and which is quite a lot of money, but I was saving for a house deposit. I was planning on getting married. So I'd been saving this amount of money for many, many years. I'd sold some things to kind of have that much money, and I had it in the bank. And because, to be honest, I hadn't really started saving before I was about like 27 or 28. I had literally no money spare until that point. I'd put it into the business, or I just used it for other things. I literally was always in the overdraft. So at this point, I'd saved and saved and saved, and I'd got to having about £4,500 in the bank. And I remember getting the statement, and I'd earn, it was about 1% interest. It might not have even been that. It was absolutely terrible. I just thought, God, I've literally got the same amount of money in here when I look at it, and it's just not growing at all. And because house prices in Manchester are getting quite high now, there's no way that £4,500 was going to be enough for me to have a house deposit anytime soon, unless I just plowed more and more savings into it, which I didn't have at the time because I was investing in a business. I just thought there's no way this money is going to be really worth anything for a long period of time. So this is where, after doing a virtual account for some time, I thought I'm going to invest into Shopify. So in 2016, I invested £3,000 of that £4,500 I had in the bank into Shopify, and it was $36 a share in 2016. Now, 2 years later, the price went up 232%. So my £3,000 was now worth nearly £10,000, which was insane. I'd never had that much money sitting in my bank account before. So along with a couple of other shares, I sold that, and I finally had enough money for my house deposit. So I used all that money, I put it into a house, but at this point I could really see the power of investing. If it wasn't for that Shopify increase or that investment, I just wouldn't have had enough money to buy my house at that time. And I probably would have been saving for many more years to kind of get the house deposit that I needed together. So as soon as I paid for that house, I really knew that I had to start saving. This was the first time in my life I'd started saving, and it worked really well. So I started to put more money back into Shopify, and I put £2,000 into Shopify in 2018, and then I put another £2,000 in the year of 2019, just buying at various points throughout the year. If I had £500 here or there, I would save it, and then I'd put it back into Shopify. So I bought all of those Shopify shares at an average share price of $193 a share. Now, today, the share price of Shopify is worth $1,486 a share. So that's a 676% increase, meaning just my £4,000 worth of Shopify shares is now worth, at today's value, £32,000. So that's sitting in a share dealing account, a crazy amount of money for not doing any work. It blows my mind every time I think about that. So remember as well what I said earlier on in the video. It's only worth that if I sell that today. It could drop by 80% tomorrow. It could go up tomorrow, and that's what I'm obviously hoping for. But it now means I can use that money and then reinvest it into maybe my next house. I'm actually going to invest that in a new business we're starting. But it's just crazy that a share that you just put money into can make you that much money. Now, that one, of course, is just very rare. That happens very rarely. A lot of the other shares I've got have either gone down in value in some cases, or just made a nice sort of 3, 4, 5, 10% a year. But it just goes to show you, if you pick the right share, you can make some serious amounts of money. It's not just like a thing you hear on YouTube that people just make up. It does actually happen. Now, I just want to reiterate, that is an amazing example. It's really like a probably once in a lifetime type share. And not all of my shares are up like that. I've got many that are down that I'll show you here below. But on average, I've made about 15 to 30% every single year since 2016. So it's much, much better than just leaving that money sitting in your bank account. So at the moment, I'm talking about all the positives when it comes to investing in shares, but have I bought any terrible shares, or what are my worst shares? I'm gonna share that with you right now. So if we look into my portfolio, you can see that my whole portfolio is actually 45.22% up, which is really, really good. And that's the important thing about having all of your eggs in multiple baskets. If you have a couple of shares that are dragging you down, it doesn't really matter so much if the other ones are going up. But anyway, let's talk about these worst performing shares. So I've got 61 shares in Xpeng. I bought those for £2,954. They are now down 38%. So my £2,954 is now worth £1,800. I've got shares in Eve Sleep. Now, Eve are a company that make mattresses. You might have seen their adverts on TV. I've got one at home. I really like the brand, which is one reason why I wanted to get into this share. But I invested £2,468 into Eve, and at today's price, it's gone down 30%. So my £2,468 investment is now only worth £1,712. So you can see it is really possible, of course, to lose money too. But as I mentioned, this is part of my whole portfolio. So my whole portfolio is up. Yes, I have some shares that are down. So as long as you can kind of weather the storm, I still believe in these companies, which is why I haven't sold. But there have been cases where actually the tide has turned for some companies. Maybe something's gone fundamentally wrong with the company, and I have sold at a loss, because it's actually quite sometimes advantageous to sell even at a loss. If you have another company which is really, really growing fast, sometimes it's actually worth pulling that money out and then investing it into another share or fund that you might be interested in. So it's just something to consider, but they are a few of my worst shares. Okay, so let's talk about how much money do you actually need to get started. Well, the first thing to think about is actually the share price itself. So I know a lot of people have said to me, right, I want to buy shares in Apple. But for example, an Apple share could cost you $1,500, and that's for one share. And unfortunately, you can't buy half a share. So if you want one share in Apple, it will cost you £1,500. Now, all shares are different prices. You can even buy shares for pennies. So some companies, UK companies, that might be 5p per share, and you could buy a load of shares. So it really is, you have to take a lot of factors into account when looking at the share price. Now, secondly, you need to take a look at fees. When I started, I made a huge mistake. You see, I was a bit scared of losing money. I didn't have much spare money, so I was just saving up £300 here, £300 there, and investing that into various companies. But the problem with that is I didn't really take into consideration the buy and sell fee. So I'm with Halifax Share Dealing, and there's a £12.50 fee when you buy a share and £12.50 fee when you sell a share. Doesn't sound like a lot, I know, but it meant that when I was buying £300 worth of shares in a company, the share price would need to go up 8% for me to cover the buy and sell fees. So even when my shares went up 5% and I was thinking, ooh, this is great, I was actually still making a loss. So realistically, I think you need to save up £1,000, and you can save it up separately until you're ready. Save up £1,000, and then in my case, I only need to make 2.5% to cover those buy and sell fees. So you just need to make sure that you're kind of covering your fees with the amount that you think your share could go up. So before you get started, I definitely recommend setting up a virtual share account. Now, there are some tools to doing this online, but you can just use an Excel sheet or a Google Sheet that I'm using right here. I'll put a link in the description below in case you want to download this one, but it's really, really easy to do. All you need to do is create a column of the name of the share. You want the ticket name, which is like the ticker ID. You want the price at today's price, and then how many shares you would have bought if you were really buying them. And then each month, if you want to, you can create a new column and you can put in the price of the share at the current present price. And that way you can get an idea about how your choices would have gone in the real world. Have your share prices gone up or down? And it's really interesting to see this before you think about doing it with real money. Now, this is really just to roughly see how you would do and just to make sure you feel comfortable. So you're not just, putting in your money in randomly, you're actually seeing if actually the choices that you would make would actually work out in the real world. So it's a great way to get started. Now, when I first started, before I set up a proper share dealing account, I used an app called eToro. You may have seen their television adverts. And it's just a very simple iPhone or Android app that you can download. You can set up very quickly, and you can buy and sell shares with almost little to no fees. They do make the sort of fees elsewhere, but it's a great way to get started if you don't want to go through the rigmarole of setting up with your bank account. And I'll definitely put a link in the description below if you want to check out that app. Now, if you want to set up a proper share dealing account, I'd highly recommend you set up an ISA share dealing account. Now, I can hear you through the camera, what is this? Another thing I need to understand. Well, essentially, an ISA is something we have here in the UK, and there's similar schemes in other countries. And an ISA is a tax-free method of saving money or taking the money out tax-free. So in our country, in the UK, you can put up to £20,000 into an ISA. Now, it can be an ISA that your bank runs, but in this case, in this video, we're talking about a stocks and shares ISA. So you can either invest that money from that ISA into an index fund or just companies that you want to invest in. And any money you make, any profits you make will be tax-free. So even if, let's say you top up the account fully, you put £20,000 in, and you have a share that just goes crazy, it doubles, and you have £40,000 now in your share dealing account, your ISA account, you won't be taxed anything on that £20,000 profit. Whereas if you set up a normal share dealing account, any profit you make is seen as a capital gains, and you'll get capital gains tax for the profits you make on those shares. So I hope that makes sense. Now, the platform I use is called Halifax Share Dealing. Now, it's not perfect, and I've heard other ones are better. I've heard a few friends use Hargreaves Lansdown, which is supposed to be very good. And there are many, many other companies out there, but these are the only two that I've really looked and dealt with. So they're the only two that I can kind of actually recommend. I don't want to recommend something that may turn out to be rubbish. So definitely check out Halifax Share Dealing and Hargreaves Lansdown. Good platforms and fairly low fees as well. Now, let's say you've set up these accounts, how long should you invest for? Now, with a share, you can actually buy it today and sell it tomorrow. But I really think if you're going to invest your money, you want to do this for the long term. And by long term, I mean like a minimum of 3 years, because really shares don't change that much on a day-to-day basis. So you really want to lock your money away for at least 3 years, and that will also help you weather out the storm as well. Let's just say another pandemic hits tomorrow and your shares drop 30%. You know, within 3 years' time, that will probably be done and dusted, and your shares will be back to at least where they were, or hopefully in profit. So definitely think long term. I mean, the shares that I've got, I took some out when I got married. I took out some when I bought the house. I took out some to invest in a business. But generally, a lot of the shares I have now that I've done those big life things, are there for really my retirement, or again, if we want to buy a bigger house at some point in the future, or maybe if I have kids in the future, it could help them in their education and stuff like that. But definitely invest for the long term. But that said, if you've been looking at a company and you think this company might double in 10 years, but it actually doubles within a month, consider selling it, because as we've mentioned before, you only make money if you sell a share. So if you have a company and it doubles in price, and you think you're going to need this money in the future, definitely consider selling it, because there's been plenty of times where I haven't done that. A share has doubled in price. I keep thinking, wow, this is going to double every few months, and it doesn't. It actually drops by 80%. Something goes wrong, the company goes bankrupt, whatever. It can happen. So if you're up, you're up. Do take your interest or your profits where you can, especially if you're going to need it for a big life event like a wedding or a car or a house or something like that. Definitely take out your profits. And you can do that, of course, at any time you want to. Now, here's a big thing before you start. Please take this advice. This actually is advice. If you're going to start investing in stocks or shares or anything, just make sure you've paid off any credit cards that you've got or loans, because most credit cards will be like 39% interest. So there's no point you putting money into a savings account where you could hopefully earn 10% if you're paying out 39% to a credit card or debt or a loan that you may have. So please make sure you pay off any debts or credit cards first. That will actually help you save a lot more money than you even realize. And then once you've done that, you can start saving money for your future. So with all that said, the main thing I want you to take away from this video is that you need to make it a habit in the first place to actually start saving. I didn't save anything till I was about 27, and it's actually quite late. So if you're younger than me, start saving as soon as you can. Even if it's just a few pounds or dollars every single week, it will really make a big difference. And the other reason I didn't start saving straight away was because I felt like for some reason, if I was to invest or save £1,000, that £1,000 mentally is gone and I've lost it. But it couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, like, let's say you invest £1,000 today and that share drops 10% and you need that money. You've still got £900. You haven't lost everything. It's not the end of the world. It's amazing how much money we'll spend on trainers and coffees and holidays, but losing £100 in a saving really, really stresses us out. It is really, really weird. But also remember that the share price can go up over time, and you only make that money if you sell that share. So just remember, if you put that £1,000 into a bank account, you can get it back out, and probably what will happen is you'll put it into a share. Over time, that share will go up 30%. You might need £300 for a holiday, and you can just take out that profit, and you've still got your original investment of £1,000. So it's well worth doing. Oh, and lastly, be aware of scam videos and gurus and everything else on YouTube. There's a lot of people out there, and I've seen it all, selling you courses, selling you random things to invest in, selling you a lot of crypto, which is very dodgy in some cases. You know, I'm talking about these new coins that just pop up out of nowhere. Just be really, really mindful of that, and be careful of people that over promise. As I've mentioned, this is not financial advice, so I'm not trying to sell you anything here. There's no course here for you to buy. So just make sure you don't fall for any scams or any of those online gurus. But anyway, I hope this video has helped. Let me know if it has in the comments section below. Are you new to investing? Are you thinking of investing? Let me know what companies you're thinking of investing in the comments section below. And if you want me to talk about any other investments I've done, like crypto or business, let me know also in the comments section below. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.